So you can see what we've done. We've just taken this as a format and start asking questions, and it just kind of elicits and pulls it out. And as it does so, it gives us a sense of what leadership is about, and the best kind of leadership. Obviously, we lead by talking, by communicating, by relating, by coaching, by facilitating, by setting frames. So communication is just so much at the heart of leading. And on this one page that we've got some of this, what I've done is just cut and clipped from our website what we've been looking in neurosemantics for the kind of leaders we want to play a significant role. And we divided it between being criteria and doing criteria. This is page 106. And under being criteria, being authentic, being real. Because one of the best ways to lead is to lead by who you are. So in the roles that you play and the leadership that you exercise, we exercise so much by who we are. And so authenticity, being and acting from our own true self without needing the roles or the masks or the personas. Now there is authority that is assigned authority, and we can play a role because we have the right to play that role, but the best authority is when we're authoring our own life and it's authentic. Integrity, being as good as your word, being impeccably honest and fair-minded. And then congruent, so that what we're presenting and teaching and offering and communicating and the frames and the vision, we're doing it ourselves. So that makes us an example because we're congruent with it. So who we are leads, and then what we do leads. The idea of a servant leader, a contributing leader, someone who's giving him or herself, serving others, contributing, making things happen. Collaborating, so being a team player, cooperating with others, being able to recognize the responsibility for difference, pioneering, and then communicating. And when it comes to communication, the best leaders are those who can put into words the dreams, maybe even the unexpressed dreams of those with whom that is just now emerging, and disclosing in ways that are clear, precise, succinct, engaging, and compelling. And so if this is real brief description using the matrix model of leadership, then as we want to improve the quality of our leadership, so that as you have influence with people and lead out in areas of importance in your business, in your personal life, and develop more leadership, and maybe even decide I'm going to become more and more of a leader in an area. In a specific arena, then we could once again identify what are the best states for that, what are the meanings, and what frames do I need to set to give myself permission to exercise that kind of influence with others. Thoughts?
Well, if you were moving into a leadership position, would a good way to be to maybe draw it out like this and identify where you are and call that your map?
Right. Because then we can now start self-coaching to our own leadership matrix to build up this matrix. Or if you're coaching, training, working with somebody, one of the first questions is, do you think of yourself as a leader? And that's one of the first things in the self matrix. Do you even think of yourself as a leader? Who would you have to become to even think of yourself that way? Because just like we all of us sell, all of us lead. We may not lead great hordes of people, but we lead. There's people who we influence and we lead them somewhere for something, for some purpose. And so do you think of yourself as a leader? Do you want to be a leader? Do you believe you deserve to be a leader? Do you have something that you want to lead people to? And so the whole subject of leadership. I worked with one of the first modeling projects I did after Resilience in Salt Lake City. Jeff Hayes contacted me. He was doing some production development, and Jeff Hayes contacted me, and he had brought in 2 or 3 people to teach a group of people, a staff of people, 6 or 7 people, how to model. He had brought David Gordon in for a while, and then he brought me in for 5 days. And I worked with his staff of 7 people to teach them how to model. They sent out letters. They sent out 300 letters to women in leadership. That was the general title, Women in Leadership. Women who they considered had broken through the glass barrier. So they sent out to a lot of political leaders, a lot of leaders in business, CEOs. They sent out to Margaret Thatcher. They sent it out to lots and lots of women. They immediately got 25 of those 50 of those 300 letters came back and said they would agree to be interviewed. So to prepare for that interview, I worked with them for 5 days, David did, and we practiced on some people in town. We practiced doing some modeling with some people in town. And once we developed some of that modeling, they sent out their crew. Jeff, NLP trained at a master prac level, was the main questioner from the NLP standpoint. His sister, Jennifer, who Dr. Jennifer Hayes is at Baylor University in Houston. She runs the head of research in the medical department. And so she took the scientific approach to ask those kinds of questions. There was one person who was transcribing things and writing notes to both of them as they were interviewing, and there's one person who had the audio equipment to record all of this. So they ended up doing 25. And I was a part of it, so they would send back these transcripts. Once they had the transcripts done, I'd go through it looking for meta-programs, meta-states, and structural things. I would write it all up and send it back to them. There were other people who were doing some other things with it, so we were going to model out and find the principles. They interviewed Candace Pert. They interviewed Louise Hay. They interviewed Sally Ride, the first woman astronaut. They interviewed Louise Hayes. They interviewed, as it went on and on, some of the key people. The material is proprietary material now, so I don't have access to it. I can tell the story about it, but Jennifer is teaching that material at Baylor now. All 24 out of those 25 women, when they asked the question, "Are you a leader?" The 24 said no. Louise Hayes said, "No, I'm not a leader." And they said, "But 5,000 women will come to one of your things." And she says, "I'm just sharing with them some of the things I do. I'm not leading them anywhere." And Candace Pert, she said, "Well, I don't lead anybody. I'm a physicist, and I'm an engineer, and I got into space because I had these skills, and I'm not leading nobody's following me." 24 out of 25 did, and one of the main principles of the whole modeling project, there weren't too many that came out of it because they were too diverse. There wasn't enough consistency, but one was the conclusion that they drew is that women in leadership, and the kind of leadership that women at that level experience, most of them learned and knew how to fly under the radar. So by not presenting themselves as a leader, there was less, to be shot down. They flew under the radar.
What country was this in?
This country.
How do you spell that university?
It's Baylor University, Baylor, Baylor University. Dr. Jennifer Hayes. Hays, And so that was the principle of leadership there. So when we look at specific kinds of leadership in certain areas, there may be a certain way the matrix for those who are most successful operate in terms of what's the best kind of framing, believing to do that would support that as well as anything. In the last few years, I've been reading and really searching out a lot about leadership, trying to understand it. And because there's so many kinds and so many different areas, really focusing in on who is the group, what is the nature of the group, what is its goals and purposes and values, what are the meta-programs of that group, and how would you pace and lead that group, and to where and what way, and what would be the style, what would be the modus operandi. So when it comes to leadership, we would have to focus in, but we got the general structure of it, what's involved in leadership. So do you think of yourself as a leader?
I'm curious who the woman was that said she was a leader.
At this point, I don't even remember. I don't remember. I think it was Leslie Stahl. She was one that they interviewed. I think she was the only one. but I don't remember that for sure. I may be wrong
And the
about that.
dominant mental state?
Because, and the problem we had, and I didn't even recognize it when we were doing it, because they wanted to women in leadership, it was too broad. It was just way too broad. We should have really pulled it into women in business, leadership business, or women. So it was just way too broad. And so, in terms of modeling, I was almost everything really being clear about what I want to model.
A similar study was done among Arab leaders recently, and I remember the top two, and that was having a strong mother who pushed them educationally and in learning and spent time, talking about the world and aspirations, intentions and meanings, in other words, and having a model. This is one of the things we're trying to do in the UAE, is because business is new, it's a new country, is to try to find models for young people, because they haven't got necessarily models in their own country, because the people of my age didn't have schools. There were no schools. They were Bedu, they were moving around. So they have to find other models.
What year did you say that was from?
Well, the years get by. I'm going to say it was 97.
Oh.
So it wasn't all that.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say before that. So then
I'm going to say 96, 97, somewhere in there. So what would where should we go with this in terms of leadership? Leading your self-leadership, or leadership at whatever level, business or personal. I've been really interested in this in the last few years, because as neurosemantics has grown, as people have wanted to be a part of it, then it's really dawned on me, where are we leading? How can we cultivate leaders? And one of the reasons I want to present this is maybe to throw out a goal, because we need leaders. Because the quality of any movement, the quality of any field are the leaders in that field. Who are the leaders, and who are the upcoming leaders, and are the leaders developed, and are the leaders accountable to anybody? Because if there's any contrastive analysis, is what happened in NLP without that, if it's left to be on its own. So how do we cultivate leaders? And if we did, what would we be cultivating and developing? And if you were to set yourself on a program to become a leader in 10 years, that is, to really become excellent at that, what would be the steps and stages you would need to go through, grow through, to where you have confidence about that and you believe in that, and you take that on and then utilize some of these leadership criteria that we've set this criteria, and we benchmark this criteria so that we can tell if a person is a leader. Now you can be a leader in ideas. You can be a leader in actual group support and nurturing and development in that way. So there's different areas for leadership. One of the things I want to develop is leaders in developing. So it's the R&D branch of neurosemantics, the developers, the people who we will support as they come up with new processes, patterns, develop, and they can present it, and we'll cultivate that. So we support that. One of the saddest things I ever became aware of, I was with Robert Dilts last year in Orlando, Florida, and I asked him, I said, has John or Richard ever acknowledged the things you have contributed to NLP? Because all of a sudden I realized when I went through my training with Richard Bandler, we didn't learn logical levels, we didn't learn score, we didn't learn this, we didn't learn that. I had to find that out later. And Robert said he's never been acknowledged for that. That as far as he's concerned, as far as they are concerned, they don't recognize that as NLP.
Pure NLP.
Yeah, that the pure NLP is what they developed, and he had some things, but they don't know if that's. So even supporting, I mean, if anybody should be supported as a developer. So then I started thinking, am I supporting anybody? Am I helping anybody to develop, to come up with whatever their project they're working on, and support that and help them to get that out there? Because I realized, what kind of leader am I if I'm not doing that? So so helping people to be that part, or the people with ideas, or the people who know things. In the book, The Tipping Point, by, see if I can recall his name now, Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell. He'll come. He talks about sociological changes and moves in any culture, and he talks about three key people. He talks about mavens, which I guess is a Hebrew, Jewish word for the knowledge holders. People with specialized knowledge, the mavens. And then he talks about the salespeople, the people who can sell the new idea, and that every movement will have the people who develop the ideas, the salespeople who can do it, and then the connectors. Mavens is M-A-V-E-N-S, mavens, and then the connectors. And he gives example after example of different movements and the people who play those roles. So in terms of leadership, there's the people with the ideas, the creative ones. There's the people who can sell. I know for myself that is not my role. I'm doing a lot of that, but I know that we need leaders who can step up and be Tony Robbins. And we've had many people raise their hand to say, I want to take that place. and I want to put the mantle on them and say, go for it, to play that leadership role. And then the connectors. People who know people who know people who can get people in, connectors. And that tends to be a tremendous leadership role. And so in terms of leadership, there's different kinds and different roles that we play in supporting all of that.
Good, isn't it? And I'm getting to the point where I hate this job because I want to be doing what they're doing. And I'm not having fun anymore. And I'm administrator. I'm doing all this stuff, and I want to be there.
Yeah.
And I'm dissatisfied with the people there. So then I go back to that, and then I get, you know.
Yeah.
And who's staying in the classroom was the bad teachers. So give the bad teachers the administration.
So some of the most leading businesses now to overcome this vertical climb out of competence is to create other directions, and it's called broadbanding, so that instead of the only way for more prestige and money is to go that way, they're creating more prestige and money in other directions.
That's where coaching comes in.
And that's where coaching comes in.
Sorry, you mentioned the leader of the NLP, Robert. I don't know who that is.
Robert Dilts.
Robert Dilts.
If you don't know who Robert Dilts is,
yeah, I've skipped a few steps.
He's another guy who gets your mind.
Robert was from the beginning, and he has contributed so much, and he's been one of the most congruent and integritous persons around. So any training Robert does, highly recommend.
He's in California.
Yeah, he's in California, and UC, NLPU is his website, NLPU.com. And he works with NLPCA a lot, California.
Where should we go with this in terms of leadership? Questions, comments, how you can apply it?
It's interesting that the buzzword nowadays in leadership is emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman's book in 91, but that was all theory. It didn't have the how-to. I believe that the how-to of emotional intelligence.
He's now written
NLP.
Working with Emotional Intelligence,
and still not as how-to as, for example, Dennis Brido's work.
Yeah.
He's got another book later one that's even more.
Yeah, that's on leadership. I'm trying to think of the name of it.
I don't know.
It's about leadership.
It's
Working with Emotional Intelligence is a previous one, and now he's got another one, as does several other people, tying a lot of this together.
One of the books that I often give, it's a bit old now, but it's always appreciated, is Awaken the Giant Within. Because it's easy enough that people in leadership who don't have a lot of time to read, it appeals to them, they can read it on an aeroplane, etc. I've given that book away so many times to people to just think about it. And it opens their minds to things that, getting on that treadmill and having lost the fun of it all.
I have a dilemma that I've observed in this country. America has more business schools than any country in the world, and America has the biggest trade deficits in the world. What's going on in our schools?
Okay.
Are we really teaching leadership or wealth creation for oneself or only one's company? This throws out a whole bag of stuff, but who's really teaching true leadership based on the way you're trying to define the model?
It's mostly taught through case studies, and case studies of companies that in 5 years won't even exist.
Harvard has discovered they're going to redo case analysis because you can't do good case analysis if you don't have a good structural background.
If I may bring up, as a Muslim in Islam, the issue of leadership, I mean, we have really a clear definition of it. Clear example, in fact, the perfect example is the Prophet himself. That's what, even now, even going on, when you're talking about Islamic leadership, they take the example where he has shown and also all the legacies that he has left behind.
So what is the definition of leadership?
Leadership, definitely.
Shouldn't have asked you.
I don't know, but it is congruent, definitely.
Okay,
and being
congruent.
part of the people.
Okay.
And, you know, in our term, leadership is not someone who's gloated for himself. You know, he wants to have this. In fact, leadership in Islam is one of the poorest guy among the rest. His friend has more wealth than he is.
So it's really a servant type of leadership.
Really servant.
Okay.
And then also the importance of group meeting rather than just one. You know, they consulted each other. And then the importance of correction. You know, open up to the people. I mean, if the people see him doing anything that's wrong, they are among them that are willing to stand up and correct him, even to the point that if they have to use the sword or the whatever weapon at that time. I mean, so he's really open, and one of the things is that he's beloved, is being loved by the people. You know, just being with the leaders, I mean, it just gives you a sense that, you know, it transcends many of the things.
Okay.
And even now we try to model, even in Malaysia where I come from itself. I mean, now because it's based on religious, you know, religious knowledge, most of the people, they believe, oh, they are not fit to lead. But it has been shown in Malaysia, scholars in religious belief, because they have open-mindedness, they can lead everybody, even the scientists, the doctorate, the professors, etc., they come together. And they follow him, and they all join together, sharing the knowledge, etc.
So,
leadership is developing the earned authority of the people that are in the group you're responsible for. The respect, the motivation to want to be on your team. That is the ultimate power, bottom-up power, then top-down power by the gun or by position.
all right.
That's the ultimate power of leadership.
All right.
My coach says, he says, if you work hard, people will want to work hard for you.
Yeah.
And that's like the essence of why I've been loyal to him for so long.
Okay. So, any other personal applications of leadership, or should we just move on to the next one? And
Leadership is a good idea. Self-leadership, could you explain that in your words?
well, self-leadership, same thing we've been talking about, but now I'm leading myself by setting the frames, the vision, by having a good rapport with my own self. So leadership starts with self-leadership. Because, as Richard mentioned, if a person can't get themselves to do it in the first place, they may be able to get somebody else to do it. They may have the skill or talent, they just may be able to do that. But eventually, if they're not congruent, if they don't have integrity, it will collapse. They will not be looked to as an exemplar, as a model. So self-leadership is a lot of what we've been doing here. You know, as we apply it to ourselves, and it's one of my commitments in neurosemantics that first I apply it to myself. And partly that's because congruency is the best personal power is congruency. Then I don't have to get people to trust me, because if I'm trustworthy, if I'm as good as my word, if what I say I'm going to do and I come through, then it'll be seen. And I don't have to do PR and image stuff to convince you of that. I don't have to spend a lot of time on image management. When you think about all the image management that goes on these days,
my experience is that most people don't want to be leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you take an ordinary group and ask for somebody to be chairman or something like that. But I have found that most people are good followers and good workers. So I always volunteer, and I don't have to do most of the work. I find other people to do the work.
So we're hearing some empowering police. People want to follow. They want to do good work. They want to work together. And the leader is really the facilitator. The leader facilitates that, makes that happen. And so then in self-leadership, as I facilitate and work with myself to find my passions, find my vision, create the things that are important, add value.
So self-leadership is you're setting the frame for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then self-management would then be doing what you decided you were going to do.
Yeah, managing my time now, managing my energy, managing my relationships, so that vision, that leadership can now be revealed.
What you're doing on leadership, you're looking at those beliefs. Madge brought out some good points.
Yeah, looking at the beliefs that really support someone who knows.
Mind muscle.
Yeah, and it's not, in a lot of ways, it's not going to be very different from a good coach, a good consultant, a good facilitator, because that is the person who can work with one or more people and bring out their best.
The coach is a leadership role. You've been chosen
Yeah.
as the coach.
It's interesting because where I work, there's a bunch of other guys in trading desk work around me, and they kind of look at me as the leader, I think. But I can't give them passion. I only can demonstrate it. And that's one thing about these guys. They don't seem to have that passion that really drives them at work. It's like a social club half the time. They're happy with it just enough.
Okay.
Maybe you could insert some thought viruses.
Yeah.
Some good ones.
I get to the point where I think, what am I doing with these guys? I'm going to move over there and just do my own thing.
So isn't that one thing that a leader does, and who we look to for someone who feels strong about something? And it's like, because emotions are contagious, because emotions put out an energy, when we feel the emotions about something that I also care about, then I'm drawn to it, and I see that in someone, and so I use that energy. So that's what starts leading. So leadership, this is where applying this, once we have done that, the leadership happens naturally. It really rises from the groundswell up, because we've got a vision, we've got values, and we're doing something, and people now are following. And you may not have given yourself and think of yourself as the leader. In fact, you may have other things to do. And of course, that now, do I want to develop that? Is this useful to creating this kind of a team spirit? And how do I do that? What are the specific developments that needs to make that happen? Up until about 18 months ago, if you had asked me, am I leading neurosemantics, I would say, well, no. Because I did not think of myself as doing that. That was not part of my plan. I was just trying to do the things I was doing. But I found a lot of people looking to me for some guidance. And I realized I need to be more strategic, more intentional, more thoughtful of the guidance I give out and what that's doing. And so it took a little while to even take on, to give myself permission to think of myself in that way. People would introduce me that way, and I would cringe because I did not have that self-image yet. And so in taking, yeah, I take it now, and I think that's where bringing mindfulness to it and intentionality to it, and and acceptance to it. I also know my limitations and the restraints that I'm up against with regard to that, so that part of how I want to lead now is to facilitate other leaders to rise to do the things I can't do, to do the things that so that, because one of my concerns is to make sure that if something happens, the neurosemantics will continue, and so making sure about that, and so.
You see that you can't do, that you're looking for others to do.
Oh, just lots and lots of things. I also know where my strengths are. What I would prefer to do is to stay in my study for 6 months, come out every once in a while and share something I've discovered, do a couple trainings, and then go back in. I mean, that is my passion. My passion is research. Now, because it's research with people, I need some people to experiment on a little bit from time to time, so I'll come out and do something. But I know I'm not the person to speak to groups of 1,000. Now, we've got some people coming up in neurosemantics who has that skill, that keynote speaking skill, and they can do that, and so I'm working on developing that. I'm mentoring one guy right now to do that. So that's not for me. I do want to get on some TV. I've got some things I want to play with. I want to create a TV show, a sitcom show on smart TV and intelligent TV. And I want to be a conversation coach, and I'm going to invite politicians on, and I'm going to have 6 rules. And if they violate the rules, I get to blow the whistle on them, and they lose a point if they talked over somebody. If they can't repeat the other person's point to the other person's satisfaction, they get and they lose. And so I've got an entertainment idea. And I'm talking to a couple of people, around. So I want to do that, but then I don't want to go national with it because I don't think that's for me. But I know some people in neurosemantics who's coming up who could really do a great DJ job that way. So I like pioneering out a few things and then creating a vision for that and then turning it loose for some others. So that's and there's a lot of other things that I don't have the skills to do, to minister. A lot of that. That's a whole leadership skill, how to administer and keep all this in track. And so there's just so many different kind of leadership roles. I know that it's not for me. And if I try to play all those roles because I want to control something, I'll just make a mess of it.
And you said if you had to play all of those roles that would be involved in maybe doing a whole thing of leadership. Can you say a little more about all of the roles that...
Well, there's different kinds of leadership roles, from the administrative side to the nurturing side, to the mentoring side, the coaching side, to the idea development side, to creating a business out of it, to branding it. So there's so many different roles in what we're talking about here, in that particular thing. And as each of us do a SWOT analysis, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are the opportunities? What are the threats? And my belief is we can do so much more together than apart. And I've just got lots of experience with that I know I can do so much more together, and I don't need to play every role. And if I can support others to play different roles and develop people to get ready to play those roles who, that's their passion. They would love to do that.
Thinking of how this personally applies, and I was thinking of this optimism thing and kind of ruts you can get in terms of self-leading, self-motivating. And I didn't know if you're going to go into optimism, but as I was reading that, I thought maybe you can give, if you wouldn't mind, just giving some examples there, maybe under 2, or if you want to start at the top. But I was especially interested in examples of the permanent, the pervasive, and the personal.
Okay. This is what we talked about the other day, and we can go here, maybe tie it back into leadership if we want to. Segelman was the behaviorist who created the model and developed the book and the stuff on learned helplessness. So these 3 Ps is how to undermine optimism so something negative happens. Something hurtful happens, something ugly happens, some trauma happens, and if we personalize it, it's about me. And if instead of keeping it there, we make it everywhere, we make it pervasive, it's about every aspect of life, and it's going to last forever, all into time. So space and time and person, when we bring in, personalize it, make it pervasive and permanent, this is what creates a sense of learned helplessness. And so the opposite then is to push that out, to keep it out, to not bring it in the first place. And so that's where those three magical words, this here now, or that then there, keeps it out. So that at the core of us, that evil is out there, and it's just something that happened, that then there, instead of bringing it in. And so that's going to be the core of optimism. It's not everything for optimism, but it's at least the core. So that's why you can put all the other optimistic things on top, like possibility thinking, hope, belief, desire, abundant resources, self-worth, all significance. You can add all those other things. But if you're putting that on top of a core of I'm flawed, everything about me is flawed, it's going to last forever, then that other stuff is like painting rust. It just won't stay. There's something corrosive inside because somehow we've brought some pain inside and mapped out. So the matrix is a matrix of I'm worthless, I'm helpless, I'm flawed, I'm dirty, I'm unclean, nobody will like me, however we framed it. And then it's pervasive and permanent. So this is a model for optimism. So we get a core of I have worth and value. The future, I can make the future. The future is mine to make. I can play my cards, play to my strengths. I can address my weaknesses. And while some things may be hurtful or ugly at any given time, I can always do something. And there's some parts that aren't touched by this.
It's interesting you say that. Last night I watched a show on the History Channel where people were tortured. And there's one guy who'd been in prison camp in Hanoi during the Vietnam War for 7 years and was tortured off and on. And that's kind of what he said, what got him through it.
Yeah.
There's a part of them, no matter what they do to me, they can't touch. And
And if you look at a lot of leaders have gone through a lot of painful, hurtful things, and what enabled them to become a real leader was that through that they did not do that personalizing or permanent or pervasive, and they kept an optimistic attitude. I read Mandela's biography last year, the year before, and then his Long Walk to Freedom, and then a couple other books that he wrote, and just the ability to keep that out and to believe in that vision of a new South Africa. Viktor Frankl is another great person who was he ever a leader? I don't know if he was a leader, but so I know a lot of people follow the things he said and the model he gave about how not to let them hate them, that they can't take that last freedom of human choice away. So many great leaders, and that's why this one on optimism is right here, that if you're going to be a leader, things are going to come up, things are going to happen, and there will be people trying to stop you. And so how you interpret it, whether you personalize it or if you can keep it out, so the uninsultability, but also just that optimism to not let them kill your dream.
The optimism, I think, has to go along with that drive, with that want. Because there are a lot of optimistic people, but they often become people, well, everything will be okay, and everything's sunny, and they haven't got the drive, but they've got the optimism. Without that.
Yeah.
Other thing.
Yeah. And so if it's just on top, and there's not, the core hasn't been tested, the core hasn't really been strong and is a fire, then they could probably easily be blown away if something really painful, traumatic happened.
I think 3 factors make a good leader: flexibility, learning, and focus. And so you pick your battles to make sure you have an experience of succeeding, which gives you more confidence as you go further. Yeah. So you get involved in little leadership committees or what have you, and you keep perfecting your skills, and eventually you'll be able to do bigger things.
Yeah.
I have a question. Capability, I mean, it's falling onto the primary level.
Capability?
Capability. And then from that, I mean, it could give rise to self-worth, self-metrics, isn't it?
So the capabilities, what I can do, the talents, the competencies, and so that's in the power matrix, the resources of what I can actually do, and then taking recognition of that and being confident. I can do that. I can make that happen. Yeah.
You've been talking, I guess, Mike, about
Resilience. Well, let's take a break. Let's take a 10-minute break. Stretch and move around a little bit, and we'll come back in 10 minutes. Resilience is when you trip and you're on your face. Resilience is needed when I have had a setback. And so resilience is the ability to come back or bounce back from a setback. So one question for each of us is, what is a setback for you? What knocks you down? What trips you up? What puts you flat on your back? And so the whole subject of resilience starts to ask this question. And if we wanted to map out the structure of resilience, then we would have stages of resilience. And of course, the first stage is we're up on our feet and we're moving through life. And then suddenly something happens, a trauma happens, and it knocks us down so that we're on our back, and we've been knocked down. So the knockdown. So something bad happens. Something bad happens, and what it does, it takes the wind out of us. It puts us flat on our back, and we're down and out. We're not up on our feet. And so from moving on, the setback occurs, and once that setback occurs, once that trauma, then several things occur. We usually go through emotional up and down grief period when we're doing the emotional roller coaster, doing the grief of shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, her stages of grief, that shock, I can't believe it. The bargaining, I'll do anything if I can have another chance at this. The anger, the denial, so we go through the emotional roller coaster stage. And how long does that occur? Well, to some extent, it depends upon how far you fell, how big of a setback it was, what a shock it was, how unprepared you were, what little ego strength you might have had, or how much ego strength. And so we go through the emotional ups and downs, registering the pain, and through the process we start coping. We start coping, rebuilding, regrouping, and eventually, as we start mastering that situation and rebuilding our life, we come back. And we're back again. We're ready to move on in life, and we're back. So resilience is the ability to come back from a setback. So there are steps and stages in this, and for each of us, different things would knock us out, knock the wind out of our sails, and we'd have to deal with it. Sometimes it can be losing a job, going through a divorce, going through bankruptcy, just having frustration after frustration, having a serious illness. So different kinds of things. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be that large of a thing for a setback. Resilience is this ability to bounce back. So you can see at the top of 109, the setback stage, the loss, the trauma, the hurt stage, the coping stage, coping to mastering stage, and then the comeback stage when you've returned. And so being able to identify that and not letting something take away the skills of mastery and the process of using your genius state to make things happen that's important moves us on. We use optimism at the core of this to create resilience, because if I don't bring it in and make it about myself, then I can pop through this very, very quickly. Most of resilience would be getting over that and pushing it out and undoing the damage of personal, pervasive, permanent. So some of the very first things there on page 109 is running through that, the core of optimism, to utilize that to come back. Then, of course, it depends upon what resources do you need to come back. Obviously, if you are operating from core self-esteem, then it would not be made personal in the first place. And so you'd have much more bounce on the inside and be quicker to bounce back. If you're really centered in your values and visions, if you don't let it put out your dream, because oftentimes what we have to rebuild and redo is our dream. What's my life about now? Where am I going? And rebuilding the dream that we have lost, keeping and claiming our meaning-making power, taking responsibility. We go into the stages of grief when we really don't take responsibility, when we deny it and go into shock and bargaining and depression because we're not accepting it. And the last stage of that grief thing is acceptance. Well, what if we just started with that? And what if we used acceptance as our ability to adjust to whatever occurs? So when it occurs, we just welcome it in, not condoning it, but just welcoming it in so that we come to terms with it quicker. Acceptance of what is. If it involves other people, conflict resolution skills, ego strength to face, ability to set something and follow through, a strong, compelling outcome. So you can see and you may want to make a menu list. That's what we usually do with this, to make a menu list of the things that put bounce in your soul. What put bounce in you? So that no matter how you get knocked down, you'll bounce back. You'll come back from it. And so self-appreciation, forgiveness, sensory awareness, long-term thinking, kind toughness, self-discipline, living in the moment, just on and on about those different things. But the question is, what puts bounce in you so that you can come back? If you have enough bounce, when you get knocked down, instead of going through really any trauma, you just come back. And in fact, you come back really pretty quickly. Maybe we can measure it in hours instead of months or years. We could start measuring it because there's just bounce. Because what we have inside, they can't take away from us. I mentioned the other day about Christopher Reeves. I really think that's the kind of resilience he had from the very beginning. That he didn't, while he was knocked down, he was never out, and there was just that resilience and dedication and purpose and meaning, and so resilience is that sense of bounce inside.
Actually, I've heard him talk about that beginning kind of thing, and I thought he said that he really did want to die, right in the beginning. Yeah. But then, because of his wife and the kids, that really just gave him a whole other, reframe. Right. And then, been off ever since.
Okay. So how resilient are you? If you were to gauge how resilient are you when something knocks you down, takes a breath, sets you back? Okay.
I had to learn to walk again when you took the nerve out of my leg and put it in my arm.
And put it in your arm.
And I set myself a goal. When I found I could use 2 fingers, I said, right, that's it. I'm going to use these 2 fingers. And I just practiced writing and writing. And, now I can read it back. Some other time. And it's slow. It's a lot slower. But that's okay. I've just become better at note-taking, short, speed writing. Things. I set myself goals. The goal was to get to the States to do the training in the summer. In order to do that, I had to learn to do things like wash my hair.
So what was inside?
In a way,
What was inside that gave you that bounce, so that you didn't let it get you down?
It did.
Okay,
it did.
First it did.
Yeah.
So what was in you that allowed you to bounce back?
I was bigger than it.
Okay.
And it's, again, the only that thing that somebody told me in Uganda is that you can never take this away from you. And it was a friend who's a training manager, and I was convinced that nobody will ever. My worth had gone because I love training. Nobody's ever going to hire me as a trainer because I won't be able to write on flip charts. I won't be able to do this. It was all I won't. And she took me out. She said, "Right, when are you going to get better?" And I was like plastered up here. My first trip out, and she's like, "What can I eat?" So I had pizza just because I could it was already cut and I could roll it up neat with this hand. And she said, right, when are you going to get you into the next training? I'm like, I can't. She said, when are we going to get it done? And when she believed in me, I believed in myself.
So one of the things that could bounce in you is having that support.
Oh, yeah.
That support on the outside.
She just said, we want you. Can't do without you. I'm not giving those courses to anybody else. You better get better soon.
So one of the things
and I felt needed.
We have found in the study of resilience that if a person has a support group, it's the loners who take so long to come back. Because oftentimes I need someone to pull me up and pull me out and challenge me and believe in me. So what you've described is really one of those resources that keeps them balanced.
Yeah, because it gave me my belief in myself.
Okay. And then your mental determination, I'm bigger than it.
Yeah. Just little things like, it took me 18 months to be able to put my bra on. But I knew I couldn't travel until I could do that for myself, because I couldn't stay in hotels alone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what else could bounce in you? Was there that vision of what you were going to do again?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was all towards. And there's a lot of it I'm going to prove.
Okay.
I'm going to prove it.
Okay.
Prove it. And a lot of it was, I'm going to use my NLP to do this, my self-hypnosis. I'm going to prove the power of it.
Okay.
In fact, the Neurospinal Hospital calls me in to do work with some of their clients now, because they saw that.
Okay. Good. So resilience. Resilience, we all need it, because at any time something could happen that would put us down. And so if our map is, I never, like Lucy, I expect a good life because it's just fair. And our expectation is such that I never expect, anything negative to happen, then...
People say about life's not fair. The first thing they do to you is slap you on the back. And you grab that air. Life isn't fair. Get on with it.
Get on with it.
Change the state.
So the resilience pattern is a fairly simple one. You can see some of the description there of how to actually run the resilience. The key is knowing at what stage you're in, because there'll be different resources for each stage. In order to make yourself almost immune to the setback. So on the inside you don't register and have to spend a lot of time there. The more well-adjusted your map is, the more ego strength you have, the more solidly grounded you are in your sense of your own worth and value, and a sense of visions, and that nobody can take that away, then we'll have less time in that knockdown stage. The more we have a good support group. So the things that put bounce in us and that help us to bounce back is what resilience is all about. It was studying resilience. It was mapping this out as a strategy that I originally found Metastates. I started studying resilience because I was really interested. I saw two kinds of people in both my private practice and the trainings I was doing. In the trainings I was doing, I would start with 35 people, and about halfway through it'd be about 15 people, and I would end with 10. Because when things got tough, a lot of people, it's over my head, it's too tough. And so some people drop out. And it didn't have to do with intelligence. Because some of the people who weren't as intelligent as some of the earlier ones, they would stay and persevere and persist because they really wanted it. But some people, as soon as they met one wall, or somebody criticized them, or they made a little mistake, or some kind of a little setback, they missed one session, so then they concluded they couldn't pick up.
What kind of training was it?
It was NLP training. I was just doing, this was 1991. And the same thing in the practice. I would also notice that people come in to do some therapy work around something, and some people, just the smallest little frustration of not getting something or feeling bad, and they drop out. And then other people who had much greater problems to deal with just keep at it. And I was wanting to know what makes that difference. So I started studying resilience. And at that time, there was almost nothing under that title. So I had to go study other things. That's where I went and studied Viktor Frankl and other things to see what made that. And then I started interviewing people. Because we had a lot of people at the trainings, I would say, who's been through a living hell? Who's been through just a living hell, knocked you down, but then you came back? you're back on your feet. You're going at it. And I would just try to find that strategy. And at first, I just picked anyone who went through that. But sometimes it would take a person 10 years. I talked to some people it took 20 years to come back. And then I started thinking, well, what about, can it be done sooner? So I would ask some people, who's been through living hell? And you spend a year, a month. And as I would start traveling and doing this, so by 1993, I had tracked out a lot of the strategy, the steps, the stages, and I was doing strategy work. And I was here in Denver, come to think of it, in 1994, 10 years ago, in the fall. NLP Comprehensive was presenting one of their conferences here, and I came to make a presentation in a 3-hour workshop on going for it again. I called a gentleman up who I said, who's been through living hell? So he came up, and we started mapping it. And at some point, I said, well, how did you know to go from this stage to that stage? How did you know you were ready? And he said, well, it was like I had a state about that state. And I don't know who said it. I don't know if I said, oh, a meta state, or if he said it was a meta state. But when I heard that, suddenly it all came together, and I had awarenesses that I didn't need to be looking for, the linking of states, but there was something pulling it together. And I asked him, I did ask him, what was that state? He said, I knew I would come out. I said, how'd you know? He said, I just believed I'm getting out of this. I'll come through this. And so he had beliefs that supported that, and he had a sense of that vision is big enough that I'll come back. And so it was in the study of resilience that I realized that what enables us to go through those primary states, or these stages, are some higher level states that will support that. And so as we find those things that put bounce in us, and the things that will support us coming back.
It really resonated and rang true with me, this idea of it's not about what's happening, it's about what you think about what's happening. And in 1998, I had a terrible, horrible tragedy in our family, one of my children, and which I just don't know that I'm not sure how I would have come through that, or whether I would have ever have rebounded from that experience. But I feel like the Lord prepared me, and through the study of this material, and it's like I hung on to that idea that this works. Of course, in my faith, there's so many scriptures. The one that you've quoted a couple times, that as a man thinketh in his heart, that's where it begins. It's about what you think about what's going on. So the misery and the being tied to something is giving it permission. But the freedom, and I know during that time I used to think about that speech Martin Luther King gave on the Lincoln Memorial. He said, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last." And I thought that so many times, because I know that experience would have hooked me so bad, and the spiral. I can't imagine, working through that. But we got through it, and I believe that because of my frame of mind, I was able to be able to set that for the rest of the family and hold that frame up, and we got through it. And it's an ongoing thing, and we're able to chosen as a family to decide how we're going to think and feel about the whole thing as it continues, and it's been awesome.
I lost my vision 6 years ago on my right eye, about 80% of it from optic neuritis within the brain. The sheeting swelled up from stress, pinched off my vision in 3 days. First, the bottom part went out. I couldn't see a license plate. That freaked me out. 3 days later, the top part went out. It was gone. It was just like you barely open your eye. Superman was no longer Superman. Went to the doctor. They did all these MRIs, you name it, brain scans, and it's never going to get better. If it stabilizes, you'll be lucky, and if you don't change your life, you're going to lose your left eye. How about that for a thought virus? And then after that, I started studying NLP, and in one session, Robert McDonald brought back half my vision. That was a preliminary session. And it transformed me awesomely to want to study more. And I had the belief that I had not reached a halfway point yet where it was going to get totally bad, that I believe if I did and searched out as much as I could, I would get better. And I came up with the concept that 75% of your pain is mental. If you can control that, you might be able to affect the physiological reaction, which is the thesis to what they call health certification. And this worked for me immensely. I close my left eye and I can see all of you. Parts of your faces are not there, but the other pieces are intact. And it's pretty clear. It's like looking through plexiglass with gray sand thrown all over, and certain parts are not quite clear yet. But each one of them that's not clear is a pixel that is beginning to pop open and let me see through.
So how much of a setback was that for you?
I went through a divorce because of it. It was a 2-year turnaround and another 2 years. So
not only the eye and the health stuff, but the divorce.
Yeah, and that made a difference to me. And unfortunately for her, she died 1.5 years later from depression. So I went through regret on that too. Yeah. But about 2 more years of NLP training, NLP and the master's track, and the rest was just gravy now. I'm feeling really good.
Feeling better now.
Absolutely. I just shared it with you. I said no, it's going to get better. That was it.
So resilience. Comments on resilience. You can see that we could spend a lot of time on working through those stages and adding those qualities so that when things happen, we can maintain the things that we believe in and our sense of self and our direction and purpose, and having that sense of resilience. And I like the word bounce. There's just something dynamic about bounce.
Kind of immediate, isn't it?
Yeah. And of course, one of the traits that really adds bounce is humor and lightness and playfulness and love. I mean, these are the really healing traits and qualities. It heals us. It keeps us more flexible. But that sense of bounce, the ability just to keep coming back and to operate from our system rather than just react to the things of the world. Well, we've covered a lot of stuff, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of wrap up here, and then I'm going to be around for a good while, so we can spend some time socializing and talking, or we can have a more informal talk. This morning, what I said with regard to the certification, it is a certification in neurosemantics, and it certifies that you've learned this model. As I've observed each and every one of you, I'm impressed with how much you've learned, some of the skills that you've been developing this week, how you're putting it together. It's been intensive in one sense. We've covered a lot of things, and there's very seldom that I've seen a group coalesce so quickly at the very beginning of just getting in and getting things done. And so the certification means that you're a neurosemanticist, and I hope that means something to you. The quality of the people who learn this model and who teach this model, my recommendation would be to find somebody and teach it to them, because you'll learn so much. It'll give you the ability to put in your own words, because the power of it, and so much of it comes from NLP and linguistics and so many other fields. I mean, we just stand on the shoulder of so many giants. Very little of it is original. Most of it is just put together into a certain form. And as we find new and exciting ways of expressing it, ways that will be even more dynamic, more clear, more succinct. And that's what I'm looking for in the years to come as we make redundant some of the things that we're now doing and streamline it even further so that the model can be effective. And I don't think we're going to run out of brains that need help in running themselves, or people who need help with state management anytime soon. So the more we can give it out, I think the richer we'll be, you'll be, and I'll be honored to do that. So as we pass this out, may as you detect your matrix and find your matrix and master your matrix, may you have that experience from time to time when you take a breath and your matrix responds to your mind, hopes, your dreams. It's really responsive to you. And with this power, because it is power, you can touch people, influence. This is the power that you could be very hurtful if those were your ethics. So as you go out, walk carefully, respectfully, honorably with other people, and make me proud. The question comes, what does neurosemantic certification means? And, of course, once again, your mind makes it real. And your experience makes it real, and the shared community makes it real. And so what we have here is those of you who've been with us 7 days, the ones who've left earlier, they received maybe Metastate certification or something. But for you, it's neurosemantic practitioner certification, 7 days, that combines, and part of the statement here is that you've completed 7 days of mastery skills training equivalent to accessing personal genius and living genius, foundational trainings in the field of neurosemantics. This includes study in NLP, Metastates, and the Matrix model. And so it certifies you that you're a certified neurosemanticist, which means that you have the right and the privilege to create meaning anywhere and everywhere. It means that because you've been to Metaland many, many times, and you've come back down to earth to ground it, you have the right and the privilege to jump logical levels in a single bound. And may you faster, quicker than your clients, so that you set the frames for resourcefulness, for health, for love, for compassion, for people having more enhanced and enriched lives. You've been slaying some dragons, taking some red pills, stepping out of the matrix, detecting, being aware, training, doing the jumping program, falling, and discovering exactly how in your mind-body motion system you really create a matrix of frames each and everywhere you go. And may you detect matrices in others and in shared realities called cultures and groups. And as you do so, may you really make a difference in the world so that the meanings you add enriches your life, so that you feel more value, give more value, so that it leads you to more financial independence and freedom, and more energy, vitality. And so with that, we'll honor those who are leaving us today at this hour. So Denise. Thank you.
I get a hug too. Thank you so much.
Mark. Wow, congratulations. And Brian?
Hey.
Thank you. Jim? Jim Binford. Congratulations. Burl?
Before you stood on your toe.
And Chris? Chris?
I don't think nobody's there.
Mohammed? And Marge? And Scott? Thank you. And Doug? Thank you, guys. There's a lot. Bill? Rick? Another camera. Good. Thank you. Yeah. Richard?
Thank you.
Richard? Okay. Jill? Thank you. Thank you. Rita? Thank you. Harrison? The guy who just does it. Clinton? Stacy? Oh, Tom. And from all the way from the Netherlands, Owen Beck. Thank you. Romeo. Thank you. Dean? Relinquish the whistle.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.